You're watching Late Stage Yu-Gi-Oh! My name's Alessio, and I'm going to show you how I went undefeated at my local GOAT format tournament using these two cards. So this was a small event at Pixel Haven Gaming and Collectibles in Austin, Texas. Ron and I just started playing there a couple weeks ago, and I want to shout out all the guys there for welcoming us into your community. Y'all are such good players. I've been learning so much from you, and I really appreciate your patience as I'm getting back into the game here. But I did go undefeated with this deck, and a couple people at the end were asking to look through it, see what I had going on, so I thought, why not make a video? If you've been watching Late Stage Yu-Gi-Oh!, if you've been watching our Duelist Heritage Progression Draft, you know that I am a huge fan of Mystic Tomato. I've been playing Mystic Tomato since there was such a thing as Mystic Tomato. I played it through Edison format, and when I found out that Pixel Haven had a little GOAT community, I was like, alright, let's figure out how to bring tomato control back. The spark that got me building this deck was the infamous, completely counterintuitive loophole between recruiters like Mystic Tomato and Royal Oppression. Mystic Tomato, when it's destroyed by battle, lets you special summon a monster from your deck in face-up attack position that is dark and has 1500 or less attack. Royal Oppression says that either player can pay 800 life points to negate an effect that special summons a monster or the special summon of a monster and destroy that monster. So if you're not familiar, this is the bizarre loophole. Mystic Tomato and every other monster that has an effect that triggers when it's destroyed by battle, that effect activates during the damage step. But in the damage step, neither player is allowed to voluntarily activate effects except ones that increase or decrease or otherwise modulate the attack and defense of the monsters that are battling. What that means is that Royal Oppression shuts down Scapegoat, it shuts down Metamorphosis, it shuts down Blackluster Soldier, it shuts down Reasoning, it shuts down Monster Gate, it shuts down so many of the big threats in GOAT format, but it doesn't shut down Mystic Tomato. So a tomato control variant, you've definitely seen these before if you've been around GOAT format, but Royal Oppression is a major sleeper card. You'll hear people say things like, oh, there's too much spell and trap removal in the format, you'll never get this to work, people always play around it, but that was not my experience. This caught people pretty off guard and turned some of the bigger, splashier plays in GOAT format into -2s sometimes. So I'm going to show you how I'm building this. I'm very excited about it because it includes not just Mystic Tomato, but many of the other cards that I have been playing since I was a kid and that I've always thought were awesome, and I think this deck is a way to make them all awesome together. So number one, goes without saying, 3 Mystic Tomatoes. In a way, kind of what we're doing here is like protect the deco, but instead of deco, it's protect the tomato. Because as long as we can force our opponent to destroy these by battle, we are going to always be able to get something that we can use to turn the tides on the next turn. So many good low-level dark monsters in GOAT format. So self-explanatory. Our next 3 of is one of those other cards that I've been playing since day 1. And also, if you've been watching the Duelist Heritage Progression Draft, you've seen the 3 giant germs. When one giant germ is destroyed by battle, you deal 500 damage to your opponent, and then you can special summon as many other giant germs from your deck as you want in attack position. Sometimes games with this Tomatopression deck can go really fast, partly because they really just crank out damage. You can creature swap away a giant germ, attack into the germ, that's 500 damage plus whatever damage the monster that you got swapped went over the top. Then you summon out 2 more, that's 2,000 more damage. These both accelerate your game and slow down your opponent because all of a sudden there are all of these bodies on board that they have to get through in order to gain control of the game. Plus, they deck thin. You pull 2 cards out of your deck. That's not nothing. I've always loved these. I've always thought, you know, there's all sorts of cool things you can do with them. We have a video on the channel of me using these with Junk Synchron. So I'm really pleased, in particular, that Giant Germ works in this list. And later on, you'll see another cool trick that running these enables. At this point, you might be thinking, Alessio, other people run recruiters in GOAT format. Yes, obviously, we're not going to grind out the game to an advantageous point for us if our opponent is also able to special summon during the damage step. But that's why we are using another one of my old ace monsters, Dark Ruler Hades. 2450, 50 more than those monarchs, for the people who are like, why isn't this just a monarch? But Dark Ruler Hades, if you don't know, level 6 Fiend, when he or another one of your Fiends destroys a monster by battle, negate that monster's effect. That is really relevant, not just to neutralize our opponent's recruiters so they can't play around the oppression, but it deals with Magician of Faith too, which is like one way that you can sort of like suddenly lose a game as if your opponent Magician of Faith's back, Graceful Charity or something really big. If we can establish this with the Royal Oppression, we're in a pretty darn good position. Another 2 of that you may be not used to seeing that much in GOAT format is the 2 Nudoria. Fiend, 1200 attack, dark, so fetchable by Tomato, just like the Germs. If Nudoria is destroyed by battle, you destroy any one of your opponent's monsters on the field. You get to pick. So Nudoria is also just like exactly what we're trying to do in this deck. We are trying to make it so that everything our opponent does is a trade. We are happy to make 1-for-1 trades because we are not going to have dead cards. We are always going to be able to loop our tomatoes into more stuff, but they're going to be drawing dead. A little low on the attack with Nudoria. Sometimes you find yourself in a position where you would rather have a bigger beater, but you're almost never really unhappy to see this because you can always set it. Even if your opponent has 2 monsters, they attack into Nudoria with one of them, and Nudoria can take out the second attacker, so you can kind of buffer your life points this way. Or you can use, again, creature swap. This is coming up a lot, I promise. You'll see those in a bit. But creature swap in Nudoria is an interesting one because some of these GOAT games can get very, kind of like slow, and the board can get really cluttered. And if there's something on your opponent's board that you can't figure out how to deal with otherwise, you can swap them a Nudoria, attack the Nudoria, it'll activate in your graveyard, and then instead of, like a creature swap, like you don't get to choose what you take, but Nudoria lets you choose anything. So it works well for that reason, slows down the game, and as long as we can, get the game to grind to a slower pace, we can usually toolbox out what we need. Speaking of wanting bigger hitters to beat over things, especially in the late game, we've got the 2 Kaikus. This is kind of an anti-meta deck, even though it's like a dark deck. So Kaiku makes a lot of sense. He, stops your opponent from using Blackluster Soldier, Chaos Sorcerer. You do need in the end game of this deck to have just big dudes. We're talking really like 1,800 dudes. That can sometimes make the difference between wrapping the game up and like kind of losing your control because your opponent just has something big and you've used your Nudorias already and you're like, what do I do with this? So Kaiku, excellent, never unhappy to see it. The rest of our tomato package is going to be a Donzalug, a Spirit Reaper, and a Sangan. Kind of no-brainers. Again, the creature swap play with Donzalug or Spirit Reaper, hit into your own tomato, bring, ideally Donzalug back, but either one, and then hit in and pitch a card from your opponent's hand. Super good. Sangan and Spirit Reaper, just things you want. Slowing down the game, toolboxing, they don't need much more explanation. Some more kind of obvious things. Jinzo, Breaker, Tribe Infecting Virus. All 3 of these are very good attackers and also, take care of our opponent's stuff. I'm really looking for something creative to say about some of these cards, but it's GOAT format. You play these, kind of end of story. More kind of staple stuff. DD Warrior Lady, Exiled Force, and maybe on a slightly less predictable note, DD Assailant. I just liked how this guy played. He's not as versatile as Warrior Lady or Exiled Force, but again, that 1700 attack can be really relevant. But DD Warrior Lady, like Dark Ruler Hades, is how we make sure our opponent does not get their recruiters off. Exiled Force kind of does the best of both worlds, right? Because you can pop a bigger thing or you can pop the recruiter. So these are, important parts of the sort of anti-meta stun package that we are rolling with here. And I promised you something spicy, and here it is. I did manage to summon at the event Dark Necro Fear. you need 3 fiends to summon it. You need to banish 3 fiends from your graveyard. This is a fiend that turns into 3 fiends. It's like a no-brainer. Like, if you're running Giant Germ, it's really almost no opportunity cost to run Dark Necrofear. It's not like the best thing ever. I feel like the 2200 attack sometimes can be a little disappointing, and the ability where it equips itself at the end of turn onto another monster and becomes Snatch Steal. Also, sometimes a little situational, it doesn't work out, but being able to drop a 2200 individual with virtually no setup, all you have to do is go Tomato Germ. That can, like, you know, kind of bring a game to a close out of nowhere. So really did enjoy this. I think it exceeded expectations. I've said creature swap 6 billion times. Here's 2 creature swaps. I would probably run 3 if I were allowed to. All that gets bricky. So maybe the 2 that I'm allowed is the perfect amount. But yeah, people are going to be afraid of these. We just have such favorable swaps. Gets our engine going. It's a way to deal with, if not benefit from, our opponent playing out bigger threats. A no-brainer. More no-brainers. Pot of Greed, Graceful Charity. Yeah. Wow, content. Look at this. Look at this original content. Mystical Space Typhoon, Heavy Storm. You need those. They're good. The thing that can go the most wrong for this deck, I think, is our recruiters being popped by effects, and everyone's using Exiled Force. Like, every single deck in GOAT uses Exiled Force. At the very least, everyone's playing Mirror Force. These handle the back row, but because of the prevalence of stuff like Exiled Force, I'm also maining 1 My Body as a Shield. This was surprising to some people. I think, depending on your meta, maining 2 wouldn't even be wrong, because once your first tomato or your first germ goes to grave and it didn't get to activate, then you start to be in that position where you're like, all right, where's the rest of my gas coming from? And then you can get bulldozed. My Body as a win condition, basically. I really like the 1. I think there's no argument to go less than 1 on this. Testing with 2 forthcoming. Snatch Steal, Premature Burial, yeah. And 1 Book of Moon also came in handy at the event because we had some Mystic Swordsman level 2 running around, and that's another thing that kind of deals with the recruiters. We're running so many monsters on the smaller end of things. If we're against a beatdown deck, turning something into defense position, you know, it can protect one of our monsters, but it also quite reliably lets us beat over that problematic monster. So 1 for now. I'm digging the 1. And we're moving on to the traps. Royal Oppression. I talked about this already. Card comes out of nowhere. People do not even know that it's in the format. But yeah, in my experience, it was really just like cut off that 1 big play, and you know that changes the tide of the game. I do like 2 Sakuretsu armors. I don't see everyone on these in GOAT format these days, but I'm never unhappy to see them. Again, like as much 1-for-1 trading as we can do, the better, because we are going to be able to squeeze out marginally more advantage. So yeah, Sakuretsu always came in handy. And then, you know, we finish it out with more of the obvious ones. This Solemn was actually in my prize pack that I won at this event, so now it's living in this deck. But you know, Mirror Force Torrential, Solemn, self-explanatory. Dust Shoot, I've said on this channel before that I'm not a fan of, but I think running it in Tomatopression made me a believer. It's so worth it when it's good, that, you know, the other half of the times when you draw it late game and it's dead, in the grand scheme of things, it is still worth it. Being able to, like, snipe their highest value monster, or, like, you know, their recruiter, the one that's going to be able to, you know, get around our floodgates, is amazing. Wins games on its own, arguably. So yeah, there you go. That is the main deck. Side decking, I think, always kind of has to be contingent on your meta and tailored to that, but a couple of things that I think are worth considering for the side here is that, for instance, if you find yourself going against Monarchs or Warriors or something like that and not Chaos Turbo, swap out the Royal Oppressions for Skill Drains. Skill Drain hurts us like marginally more than Royal Oppression. Like it shuts off, Kaiku, Breaker, Tribe Infecting Virus, Spirit Reaper, but our opponent is also playing all of those things 90% of the time. So it's like pretty neat to be able to, have something that will cover the other half of the spectrum, because the Royal Oppressions sometimes are dead. Sometimes they're not that relevant, in the case, again, of mirror matches, things like that. So I do really like 2 skill drains in the side. Another option for going up against beatdown decks or decks that just keep having big beaters is the Bazoos. What we are doing is filling the graveyard with monsters, like in a big way, with the tomatoes and especially the giant germs. If you're afraid about conflicting, the deck cannibalizing itself, you could side out the Dark Necropheres. I might toy around with maining this in the future, just because you're usually going to have, the gas engrave to get away with it. This is, I guess, a really a personal thing. I'm just not big into maining a Nobleman of Crossout. I feel like if your biggest problem is a set monster, you're not under that much pressure. But yeah, there are decks that just set like crazy, and if you see that happening, if you see the deck that's on double Magician of Faith, or the whole Gravekeeper engine, you do want access to these, so I would always keep these in the side. Some things that I like for the burn matchup, or the kind of stall matchup, are Mobius. I know you're watching, Alexander. This is the copy that you signed and gave me for my birthday, so thank you very much. Throwing in a Mobius to deal with gravity binds and stuff that's annoying us seems pretty straightforward. And Lava Golem, I'm curious about. I think I need more data points on it, but using Lava Golem to get rid of again, it's the flip effect monsters and the stuff of other recruiters, like stuff that we have a hard time getting off the board without letting it resolve its effect. You can use Lava Golem to kind of eat some of those, and then in the burn or the stall matchup, you just turn the tables on your opponent, and it's like, now you're taking the damage. And if we're not in that matchup, we can give this to our opponent and theoretically creature swap it back to ourselves. So maybe risky to run in multiples, but I think throwing one in could be just kind of a surprise. But there you have it. Thank you for joining me for this little rundown of this deck that I really enjoy, Tomatopression. If you try it out, let me know how it goes. Thanks again to the gang at Pixelhaven. I'm so glad to be in y'all's orbit and get to play with y'all every week. And if you're watching from YouTube land, please remember to subscribe to Late Stage Yu-Gi-Oh! For more old school goodness. I'll see you later, y'all.